Legendary Ball over here, and I'm here to talk to you today about the next great breakout. So we're gonna talk about three guys today, three players that I think are primed for massive breakout years. Some players have already sort of broken out. Some players are looking for we're kind of looking for an opportunity for those guys to break out, and some guys are just hiding in plain sight. So we have one of each today. We have a rookie that we'll discuss that has an apparent opportunity that no one seems to care about or pay attention to. We have a player going into a contract year, year four, and we have a player that is going into year three, but he already broke out in year two. But I think he's going to break out even more in year three. So without further ado, let's get into the Ball Knower Briefings breakout stars of 2025. First on the list, we've got George Pickens. So George Pickens, one of my favorite players, but I was done with the situation in Pittsburgh. It was cooked. It was never going to work. It was never going to. After they traded for DK Metcalf and paid him, we knew that George Pickens was either going to be a complete distraction or force his way out. Now, fortunately, we didn't have to deal with any more of the bad blood than what we saw at the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025 for George Pickens. He gets a unequivocal situation upgrade with the quarterback play in Dallas with Dak Prescott, and he doesn't have to be. He's not commanding the bulk of the coverage because defenses are going to have to focus on actual wide receiver one overall in 2023, CeeDee Lamb. So George Pickens, we can look to previous success with a player whose skill set closely mirrors George Pickens, but I think George Pickens is an upgrade in every single way imaginable to Michael Gallup. And if we look at Michael Gallup's 2019 season, I believe, his career year with Dak Prescott, he goes out, he puts up 66 catches for 1,107 yards and 6 touchdowns. He averages 15 points a game in PPR. And I feel like that was a precursor to what we're dealing with. Fast forward, what we're dealing with years later with George Pickens in a contract year. We're looking at a guy who has a unique skill set that's almost impossible to quantify. So he's had more success on deep balls outside the numbers, more like 20 passes of 20 plus yards. He's accumulated almost 800 yards on outside the numbers just in the last, I believe, 2 seasons. So George Pickens is one of the most elite deep threats in the game, not deep threats in terms of breakaways, but just balls that are low percentage that can be completed at a very low clip. George Pickens catches those balls at a much higher rate than any other player in the NFL. If there's one thing that he's the best at, it's that. And now he gets paired with Dak Prescott in an offense ready-made for him to step into a role and be able to flourish in one-on-one coverage with just a massive upgrade in quarterback play. And so we're looking at George Pickens as an elite option. Currently going off the board, the pick 56 in fast draft, and going off the board a little bit later, wide receiver 27, I believe, on Underdog. So we're talking about a guy with tremendous ball skills and ability in an elite high ceiling offense. And he's going to be one of my favorite players to click the button on once we start our actual redrafts in our home league. Now, our next player that we're going to discuss is a third-year tight end, a guy who has outperformed expectations. He's supplanted a player who their organization historically will take 2 of each a position in a draft outside of quarterback, and then just let the chips fall where they may. And they fell into his lap, and he's outperformed. He's made the most of his limited opportunities, being one of the most dynamic run after catch threats in the entire NFL at the position, actually being the biggest run after catch threat. He led in yards after catch per reception last year with over 9.38 to be exact. And I'm talking about third-year Packers tight end Tucker Kraft. And what we're talking about with Tucker Kraft is a guy who represents elite upside. You heard the previous video where I discussed why I can't stop drafting Tucker Craft and Fast Draft. And now I'm giving you some game and telling you that he's going to be one of the breakout tight ends at the position in 2025. So we're talking about a guy who put up over 700 yards on 65 targets. And we have his head coach alluding to a role that could continue to grow into a Travis Kelce or George Kittle-esque role. You watched him play. He plays much more like George Kittle than he does Travis Kelce. That makes it an easy jump in my mind for him to be able to move forward and step forward as one of the most elite players at the position. So go ahead and grab him now because the price is only going up. So currently going off the board at pick 120 in the fast draft ADP, the first pick of the 12th round, you need to be grabbing Tucker Craft as much as humanly possible. And in your redrafts later on, he's going to be a late round pick. I'm preferring to grab a tight end, maybe a little bit earlier in the middle rounds, and he's certainly going to be pushed down the board. So you'll be able to grab a yin and yang tight end and have that upside in your lineup. But let's move on to our third and final player. This is a player that if you've seen anything that I've talked about in the last few months, this is a player that I've been very high on throughout the draft process. And now he goes to a team that already has a role that has been catered out and relevant for fantasy with another player. And that player being Jerick McKinnon. I'm talking about Brashard Smith. Yeah. You thought you were gonna get out of a Chev Dur Sanders production without me talking about Brashard Smith. No. So here we are talking about Brashard Smith, 5'10, 195 pounds. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs in the 7th round. You're like, oh, you're talking about a 7th round running back? You're talking about a 7th round running back in a redraft video? Yes, I'm talking about a 7th round running back in a redraft video because I'm talking about a guy who has immense upside. So, former collegiate receiver, goes to SMU, becomes the guy his first year playing running back, then puts up 1,600 total yards, 17 touchdowns. Then he gets drafted to a team that knows that, hey, we've got to put the best players on the field. We'll put a 7th rounder out there over a 1st rounder. So it leads me to believe that there's an opportunity for this 7th rounder to supplant another 7th rounder in Isaiah Pacheco, or not supplant him, but have a role alongside him. We've seen Isaiah Pacheco catch passes. It's not the fluidity and creativity after the catch that you would want. Rashard Smith has all that in spades. Again, former receiver running real routes, and we've already seen him win in training, or not training camp. Training camp's going to start for the Chiefs next Monday, I believe. But we're already seeing him in minicamp and OTA stand out as a receiver. He lined up against Christian Fulton, and he was able to beat him on a double move. He's catching balls. He caught a wheel route out of the backfield from Patrick Mahomes. It's important to note these things because we're talking about him getting reps with the ones. And if nothing else, he's a dynamic kick returner. He had a 40-yard kick return in the Senior Bowl. So I believe that there's a role in the game day 53. This is just my personal opinion. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to want to go in a lot of different directions in terms of who could be the next Bucky Irving. But if there's someone who could break into that mold, it's someone with the pass catching chops and the organizational history and support to be allowed to have a role that flourishes for fantasy and is more than just a gadget role. So I believe Brashard Smith's a great player. I believe that this could be something that pays major dividends. And that's a guy that's basically undrafted in fast draft, and he's available in the last round of your underdog best ball drafts. So we're talking about it. We're talking about late round flyers, guys that you're not going to have to pay a premium for to get them on your team. Tucker Craft's available oftentimes in the 10th round of fast draft drafts. I mean, George Pickens is around the 4-4, if I'm not mistaken, in the best ball drafts that I've done so far. So we're talking about guys who we had to get off the beaten path a little bit to find those breakouts for you. But in the Ball Noah briefings, I'm going to do the homework. You click the button, we profit. Until the next time I see you again, Remember, there's ball watchers and there's ball knowers. Assign yourselves accordingly. Till next time.